Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about my GovCon journey. I think if more people knew how easy it was to get into this business, they would do it. And when I say easy, that doesn't mean there's not hard work and there's a lot of time that goes into building a GovCon business. I think at its core, it's easy because there's a handful of steps. And if you follow those steps, this is going to work for you. It really doesn't matter who you are, what you do. And I am a shining example of that. I'm a really simple guy. Wear hoodies and t-shirts most of the time. I didn't grow up in a culture that understood business or sales or marketing or anything like that. Didn't have jobs in those arenas. And so I think if I can be a success in the government contracting space, I really think just about anybody can do it. And so that's why I really want to share my story with you a little bit today. And if any of my story resonates with you, I recommend two things to you. One, go check out my book. It's called I'm New to Government Contracting. Where do I start? I've been doing this since 2004. So I've been doing this a really, really long time. I know this business really well. My partner knows it really well. And that's number one. So go check out my book. It's called I'm New to Government Contracting. Where do I start? And then number two, if you don't want to do this journey alone, I highly recommend you come and join our community. You can go to federalaccess.com and check that out. There's also going to be a link with this video here, and you can go check that out and join our community. So I highly recommend you come be a part of our community. We meet weekly. We have tons of resources in our system, and you don't have to do this alone. So that's a couple of quick plugs there. So who am I? So first of all, if you don't know who I am and you're just watching this video, the quick introduction is my name is Michael Lejeune. I've been doing government contracting work for 20 plus years. I was in the Army. I got out of the Army, went into government contracting in a support role. I was working on a support desk in Colorado Springs, just taking calls from customers, which is actually really important to my story that I'll get into here in a little bit. But over the years, my company, Artisan Federal, has helped our clients win over $14 billion in government contracts. We've trained over 22,000 government contractors. We have a handful of Amazon best-selling books on the market. I have probably one of the longest running podcasts in the market on this. So I'm very well known in this market as somebody who knows what they're doing. I do a lot of keynotes at major conferences, things like that. So very well respected in the market. And I think that's important for you to know just a little bit about who I am. And so let me get back to my journey in this market. So I was in the Army from 94 to 99. When I got out, I went to work for a small company in Colorado Springs doing support on their help desk. I'm a techie guy by nature. It's kind of what I did in the Army. And so I was doing that kind of support work. And over the course of a couple of years, I got to know all of our clients. And as I got to know all of our clients, I got to know what was good, what was bad about the software, what they liked, what they didn't. And that was really important in my journey because building relationships is something that you typically understand is important, but you don't understand the depths of its importance until you try to build a business or try to do anything in life that is, even remotely significant, right? You realize the relationship or the power of the relationships as you start going. And so as I was in that business, I got frustrated a lot with our leadership and things, and I was trying to move up, and there was only so far to move up in a small company. And so I decided to leave the company. And when I went to leave, my mentor said, look, before you leave, I want you to try sales. And so he kind of brought me over the dark side to try to get me into sales and stuff like that. And that was a fun little journey. But it was interesting how a relationship got me a job. A relationship got me kind of a transition into another portion of the business. And then ultimately it was the relationships I would build that would make me super successful in sales, because I originally rejected the idea of joining the sales team. I thought it was crazy. I thought that was the dark side. You don't join the sales team. They're a bunch of evil people and they're not good folks. And, they're just con artists and stuff like that. And then they started talking to me about what we were doing and what we were trying to do for the company and how we were trying to grow the company. And I really caught the vision of what was going on in the sales team. And I really enjoyed where the company was going. And so I embraced the dark side. learned a little bit about sales. And when I say a little bit, I mean like a teaspoonful, like it was such a little bit about sales. Um, but what led me to my early success was my relationship with my customers. As I had said earlier, I had spent time on our help desk, getting to learn all of our customers, getting to understand their pain points, getting to understand their organization, the size, the depth, the breadth of their organizations, so that I could really understand like who are going to be the good customers and who should I focus on. And so when I transitioned into sales, I all of a sudden had this power that I didn't have as just somebody on the help desk, which is really weird. I had this power to say, like, you have a problem and I can now solve that problem. A little bit like Vanilla Ice, right? Uh, for those of you who know that. But I was like, I could solve this problem for you because I'm now in a position of authority where I can come in and make the changes to the product that you want. So let's just, you know, look at what our wildest dreams are for this product and let's make some changes. And I started making those. I started kind of pushing our sales team. I started pushing our engineering team, and we were able to just start capturing clients. So I went from being the new sales guy, no idea what to do, to I ended my first quarter with some sales. Second quarter, I blew my quota out of the water. By the third quota, they were asking me what in the world was I doing that I was now leading the sales team. And there was people on the sales team that were 20, 30 years older than me, been in sales all their life, and they were not even remotely close to me in sales. And I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing differently. It took years of kind of thinking about it to really understand what I was doing different. And the only thing I was doing differently was paying attention to the customer. And so if there's a lesson you can learn right away from this video, it's how important relationships are and paying attention to your customers, because that is what just made me such a huge success in the few months that I was doing sales. And as I embraced their pain, I was able to advocate for things we needed to do in the company to make the product better and ultimately to just serve our customers better. And that's the position I came from. And so I would very quickly transition out of just being the new sales guy to the director of sales within roughly 6 to 9 months. It might have been a year, um, somewhere around there. We went through restructuring, and when you go through restructuring, there's always, people get fired, and there's a lot of heated discussions. And I had a really heated discussion with our CEO about some things, and he said, "Well, who do you think should lead the sales team?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't trust anybody but myself." And so he put me in charge of sales. And I quickly restructured the team. We downsized it from about 13 folks to about 3 folks. I looked at our skills and our abilities and what we were doing. Again, I'm like 26 at the time. I had no business being in charge of this team. I'd never really been in charge of a team like this in my life. I had been in the Army and understood working with people under me, but they weren't directly reporting to me. When I was working on the help desk, I did rise to the level of help desk, like director, if you will, and so or supervisor. And so I was leading some people to a degree, but it wasn't like this where the company was counting on our team to actually bring in revenue. That was a very different thing for me. And so for me, I had to start reading and learning a little bit about leadership, learning about sales, learning about my customer a little bit more. And that's one of the lessons you can take away from this video too, is like, you just never stop learning. And no matter how successful you were in the corporate world, when you make the transition over into a business like this and you start growing it, you really have to embrace learning and just dive in with an open mind and focus on trying to get smarter, get better. And it's not a once a month, once a quarter. That's like a daily thing. You have to be focused on getting better. And so that was a huge part of my story early on, was just focusing on getting better. And so when we took the failing sales team, because they were failing at the time, we took them from failing to growth mode by doing a handful of things. So I'm going to outline a few of those things for you today. And so if I look off camera, if you're just watching this, I'm just looking at some of my notes so I don't forget anything that we did. One of the major things that we did was we built our first sales pipeline. I know this sounds stupid, but when I took over the sales team, we didn't actually have a sales pipeline. We didn't have a way of monitoring our sales in any way, shape, or form. There was no tracking. There was like emails back and forth here and there, but it wasn't like a consolidated approach to sales. It was very chaotic. And so I actually had every person on the team review all of the opportunities they were working on with me. We would rate them by percentage chance of closing this quarter. We would go through and talk about like what next steps were, but that all came from forming a sales pipeline. We managed it in Excel back in the day. Today you manage that in a different CRM platforms. There's tons of good CRM platforms. I highly recommend HubSpot. That's a really good one that we use very often. But back then we didn't have that, or at least I didn't even know it was there. We didn't even have Google. We didn't know that was coming on the scene. So we didn't have a lot of the online stuff. A lot of things are picking up the phone, making phone calls, having conversations, and getting leads that way, getting a referral to somebody or something else. But the sales pipeline was probably our most critical first step at organizing the chaos into something that we could actually use to determine where we are in the sales process, where we were going, what was going to be predictable revenue, that sort of thing. And then over the course of about a year of working with my salespeople, I would learn like how good they were at predicting their sales. So I had this one guy that everything was going to close this quarter, and then nothing would close that quarter. And then another guy where he was like, I'm not sure. And then a lot of stuff would close. And then me, I had enough track record to say, I think there's a 75 to 80% chance this is going to close. It's 50-50 on this. And this is probably about 30%. And I was pretty dead on. So I was able to start training my people like, look, don't put this in your pipeline at higher than 50% if you don't have these criteria. It's going to go in there at 75, 80%. If you've been talking one-on-one with the contracting officer or the program manager, you've had this kind of discussion and they say, look, it's really just a matter of time. We've put in all the requirements and now we're just waiting on contracting. There was these little criteria that we had that helped us figure out how to adjust our pipeline to know what was going to close, because we had to be predictable. We were running $3-4 million a quarter, a quarter in like our spending. So we needed to know when things were going to come in and what the timeline was and all of that. And that was just really big. Having a pipeline that was predictable, that could almost to the penny say, this is how much revenue we're going to get every single quarter. That was a big one. So that was probably one of the number one things that we did. The next thing after that was we started to look at our business model and say what's working and what's not. One of the things we had done when we came into the market was we were part of another company that spun us off as a small division and then sold us. And so they had created, to their own benefit, a reseller model. And the reseller model was how we approached the government, and it was 100% indirect. So we always went through a reseller. Even when we were doing sales, we would then say, okay, well, here are the 4 people you can buy from. Who do you want to buy from? And we'd run it through those companies or contract vehicles or whatever it was. And one of the things that I realized was we were given 50%, not 10 or 20. We were giving 50% of our revenue to resellers. And while that sounds high, or maybe it doesn't to you because it was software, the problem with that was we were doing all of the sales. So we were doing 100% of the sales effort and only getting 50% of the benefit. And I looked at that and just said, well, this is dumb. Why are we doing this? Why don't we make a change? And at first, a lot of people fought me on the change, but I said, look, we can actually reduce the price of our product to the market by a little bit and make a lot more money by selling directly. And then all that money that we were losing before is now all profit. And so with quite a bit of heartburn from a lot of people, I made the decision to change our model from a reseller indirect model to a direct selling model. And so if you're in this business thinking, well, I'm going to be the middleman or whatever, it's kind of like being in an indirect model, being in the middleman, which I don't advise the middleman strategy as a side note there. But when you are doing all the sales work and you're just getting a small portion of the revenue, it's very hard to make a living. It's hard to keep the lights on. It's hard to grow. So you need a really solid business model. So when you're looking at your business model, I recommend a direct sales approach, at least for a portion of it, maybe half of your pipeline or some of your products or services. You can sell some other people's products and things like that to get you in the door, but you need a portion of your business model that is direct to the customer for maximum profitability. And so I highly recommend that. When we decided to make this change, it took us roughly a year to roll out the change. We started notifying people that we were going to make the change. We took away their access as resellers. We kind of just voided all the reseller agreements over the course of a year. And we reset them up as strategic partners, and we would give them 10% instead of 50. So if you sold something, you're going to get 10%. If you don't sell it, you're not getting anything. Just the way it is now. Again, a lot of people didn't like that at first, but I said, look, we don't want the services on the back end. We just want our software sales. So you take all the services. We're not going to take any of that anymore. And that kind of helped, ease that pain a little bit. But again, it wasn't a fun transition. But part of what happened was our profitability just went through the roof. It just went bonkers. And that was the thing that we needed to happen in the business, is we needed profitability to go through the roof in order to survive. So we built a sales pipeline. We changed our business model. And then the next thing I did was I went and negotiated. In that time, it was with Microsoft. We flew out to Redmond and convinced their licensing reps that our costs were too high, because we were built on a third-party product that Microsoft purchased, and the cost of it was very significant in our cost. So you can see kind of the trend of what I'm doing, changing our business model, negotiating our cost. I was really focused on how do we get more profitable in what we're doing. And when I went to Microsoft, I said, look, I have a really big ask. I need you to cut our cost by somewhere between 50 and 80%. And they just laughed at me. They're like, there's no way we do it. I said, well, what if instead of buying $1 million worth of licenses from you a year, we bought 10? What would happen if we started buying $10 million a year or more from you in our licenses? What would you do for us? How would that change things? And they said, well, we would give you everything you want if you did that. I think they did that just thinking there's no way you're going to do it. What they didn't know is I'd already been lining up deals and saying, look, this is what we're going to do. I knew what my pipeline was for the first time. I knew how good our year was going to be. And so they just said, sure, we'll give you exactly what you want. We'll reduce the cost very significantly. So out of my first 3 things that I did, 2 of them were focused on reducing costs drastically, changing the business model, negotiating with our third-party vendor in order to get the best pricing in the market for what we wanted. And so once I felt like we had a solid business model, we knew what we were doing in the market, we had a rhythm on how we were doing sales, that's when we started to really attack the market. And so I kind of jokingly say this is kind of how I got on the FBI's watch list, where we started creating unsolicited proposals. And this was after 9/11. And it was literally right after 9/11. And we started with this list of every secretary and undersecretary, everybody in the White House, everybody, every major military command, every agency in the government, whoever their top people were. I wound up scraping up together this list of their names, phone numbers, fax numbers, their email addresses, their physical address. And we put together these packets. It was this unsolicited proposal on how we were just going to reshape the government by giving them our software, And looking back, it seems so silly today. I think our proposal was like almost 300 pages long. It was PowerPoint slides, and we printed it out, we put it in binders, and we sent it to all these people. And then we started faxing it to people. And the FBI watch list part comes from, at the time, it was President Bush was in office. And so I'm literally faxing his war room, emailing his private email address that's not public. I'm getting all these packets to places in the White House that I shouldn't be able to get to. And that's where I figured, well, how did I get this information? Well, that's a story for another day. But I figured that's probably how I wound up on the FBI or Secret Service watch list of, like, how's this guy getting all this information and getting stuff to the president? I just really wish I could have been in the war room when our 275 page fax started coming out over the fax machine. I think that probably would have been hilarious to see that happen. Not that they finished printing it or whatever, but if it was in the middle of the night, which I think it was late in the night when we sent it, imagine they came in and there's like 275 pages all over, strung out all over the floor, that kind of thing. So what ended up happening is we didn't get a direct contract from the unsolicited proposals. But what happened was I got a letter from Andy Card. He was the president's chief of staff at the time. And he said, Michael, appreciate you sending this out to everybody, but the president's not the person you need to talk to. Here's who you need to talk to. And I recommend you talk to these couple of people. So he gave me the name of a 3-star general and a few other folks. And that just opened the door. So even though the unsolicited proposal did not land us the contract that I hoped, it opened the door for us to talk to all these agencies that had been closed before. And so now we were in a situation where I literally had a VIP pass, this letter that was on White House stationery that I could just flash everywhere and say, the president's chief of staff told me I should talk to you. And I was able to do that over and over and over again. And that led to me being told to go talk to this person and this person and that person and this person and back and forth to all these different people. And before you know it, we started getting more contracts. And this was because we were the only ones that sold the software we had. It was sole source to us. We didn't have any sort of competition on it because there was no one else. They would look and see, was there anybody else doing this or this kind of thing? Nope, there's nothing else. So we didn't have to write proposals. We didn't have to be competitive. We were able just to get awards, and that was so cool. We wrote a couple of proposals for SBIRs. Those are Small Business Innovative Research Projects, if you've heard of those. We did a couple of those and won a few $1 million doing that. And so we did write proposals that way. But for the most part, we didn't even write proposals because we were going in, pitching what we had to the end user, to their contracting officer. We were getting these pilot little programs on their credit cards. And then once they go through the pilot program, they just put in a request for our software into contracting, and we were the only vendor. So we didn't have any competition. We didn't have to worry about that. So it's a little bit different than a lot of you. You're probably facing some competition in what you're doing, unless you have a unique product or service that you have. So it's a little bit different, but it still worked. The relationships got us in front of people. Thinking outside the box got us in front of people. And then when we started selling, we were, just unobstructed. Like we were just able to go in and just make sales happen. And so I scaled that business from about 1.2 million to roughly 11.5 million in 2 years. It was, again, mostly relationship based. The differences that happened because of our restructuring and changing our pricing model, changing our go-to-market model, changing all those made us way more profitable than we had been in the past. And so we were now able to start growing. And so that's how I got into this market. And then I'll tell you how I got into the consulting business. I got a little burned out from working in this business. I mean, I was flying back and forth from St. Louis to DC every week. It's one hell of a commute. If you haven't really thought about that, but that's a hell of a commute. So I was doing that every week. I had little kids at home, didn't like it. So I wound up reading a Tony Robbins book where he talked about how you just deserve better in life. And so I thought, you know what? I do deserve better in life. I'm going to quit this. I'm going to start a consulting company. I actually hired a Tony Robbins coach to help me figure out who I wanted to be when I grew up. I just thought, hey, I'll do some consulting in the government space and see kind of where it goes. Wound up buying a coaching franchise and coaching in the commercial world for roughly a decade and really learning the ins and outs of not only business coaching, like the fundamentals of how to grow any kind of business on the planet, but also the executive coaching side, the life coaching side under the Tony Robbins model and a few other different models because I was a coach for their firm for a little while. And then I hooked up with one of the people that was doing sales for me back in the small software company. His name is Josh Frank. He's my business partner today. And Josh had focused in on government contracting. He had written a book called The Government Sales Manual. It was really more of a manual than a book. And he had this niche, and I love the niche. And so I was like, hey, I know government contracting. We kicked ass together back in the day doing this. let's join forces with our coaching companies and see where we can go. And over the last decade plus, Josh and I have been building systems for people and helping them figure out how to kind of crack this crazy nut of government contracting. And like I said at the beginning of the video, we went from, just starting this and being a two-man person doing this all alone with, we didn't have any resources or anything, to today we have a dozen plus coaches around the country helping our clients. We have helped our clients win over 14.5 billion in government contracts and another 30 million in like IDIQs. We've helped train 22,000 people. I don't even know how many conferences we have been the keynote speaker at. We've written, I think it's, as of this video, 5 best-selling books on Amazon. You can go grab any of those books. And the stories that we have shared with people are just incredible, where people have started in this business, done $1 million or so in revenue, and then got in one of our coaching programs and built to a $3 to $5 million company, or $10 million companies that are now $50 and $100 million companies. One of our really great success stories is a guy who started his company like out of his extra room in the house. Today, he's doing $150 million a year in revenue. He was just valued, I think, at $500 million. And he's just a huge success in this market. And I can tell you stories like that all day of clients that we've been working with for a decade plus. And so it's been really rewarding. And one of the things that's been different for us, I'll just kind of give you a little behind the scenes, is we focused on having a podcast, doing a lot of social media, writing books, and really doing the speaking thing. So a lot of people didn't do podcasts. They didn't write books. I think we were kind of a pioneer in that space. And so if you are listening to this, watching this, and you're thinking, hey, that's something that I think should be part of my journey, the answer is absolutely. You will set yourself apart from everybody when you have a podcast, when you are writing a good book, when you are speaking on the circuit, like we do, and when you're using social media effectively. So I highly recommend those things. So if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a like, subscribe, and I'd love your comments on this. Like, what did you appreciate out of the video? What would you like to hear more about? Because I'm going to be shooting more of these videos where it's just kind of an in-depth look at something about either our business, something about the government contracting space, just things that will help you understand how to take your company to the next level. Whether you're brand new or you've been in this business for 50 years, I highly recommend you start watching and paying attention to the videos that we have out there. You follow us on social media, you connect with us, you go read our books. Again, at the beginning, I said, go read I'm New to Government Contracting. Where do I start? That book is good regardless of where you are on the spectrum of your journey. I've had people who've been in the business 50 years say, man, I wish I'd had that at the beginning. So that's a really good one. And then I'll leave you with this. If you are tired of doing this journey alone, you are still hitting up some walls and you're like, I'm just confused, I need some help, come and join our community. Come and join our Federal Access community. It's our Inner Circle Wednesdays are what you really need to be a part of, because Wednesdays we're live on Zoom. You get to sit across from me and usually Josh, and you get to ask us anything. And there's an hour plus of us sitting there talking with you, working through what's going on. We have a little topic that we talk about, and then we take every question under the sun. And normally we have enough time that we can stay on and answer questions well beyond the hour that we're scheduled. So please take a look at our community. See if that's something you would like to be a part of. You can join us every Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern. And then you also have email support. And that to me is like the icing on the cake, because you also have every document and template we've ever used to create our business in that community. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've got questions, pop them in the comments, and I'll see you next time.